fact that we are shipping billions of dollars for an endless war between Russia and Ukraine when we have real serious problems here at home. The problems are caused by their soft on crime policies, in which criminals know that they can commit crimes and there'll be no consequences. I think we have a unique opportunity to fix everything that's wrong with this country, and no one can say that Trump doesn't have a broad mandate to do it.
What's the key to getting people to buy into a movement, whether it's politics or in business?
Well,
so my guest today is political advisor and Republican operative for the Nixon campaign, the Reagan campaign, and the Trump campaign. So Roger Stone, welcome to the Seven Figure Squad podcast. Honored to have you.
What a great time to be alive. We're on the cusp, the beginning of America's golden age, in which Donald Trump is going to restore this country to unprecedented peace and prosperity, equal opportunity for all Americans. It's just an exciting time to be alive.
A nice shirt I see here there. That's a 2020 shirt. And I see here, if we get together one of these days, I got a 2020 Trump cigar waiting for the both of us too as well. So I'm not sure you're a cigar guy.
I look forward to that.
Let's do it. So let's unpack it. You're my second conversation post-election of a person of your stature. So how do you process, before we get into the business stuff and the finance stuff and the branding stuff, how do you process what happened on election night?
Well, we had an honest, free, fair, transparent election, which I don't believe we had in 2020. And it really did, in the end, turn out to be a referendum on the management of the country by the folks who are currently in charge. And they tried to make this election about Donald Trump, but that's not logical. In fact, every election where an incumbent is seeking re-election is about the job that the incumbent is doing. And since Joe Biden smothered Kamala Harris in his embrace, saying, oh, no, she was in on every decision. And when she herself was asked, was there anything you would have done different than Joe Biden? She said, no, I can't think of anything. Well, then she was stuck wearing his record on inflation, on gasoline prices, grocery prices, the crime epidemic going on in America, the drug epidemic going on in America, the fact that we are shipping billions of dollars for an endless war between Russia and Ukraine, when we have real serious problems here at home. There's no available affordable housing, for example. People in the end made a comparison of the Trump years in which, despite what they told us, if you elect Trump, we're going to have world war. If you elect Trump, the stock market's going to crash. Well, the stock market reached record levels.
Amazing. 1,500 points in a Dow.
Unemployment dropped to the lowest levels up to that time. We had virtually no inflation. Trump, like Biden, brought tens of thousands of troops back to the United States, but without the countries they were leaving collapsing into the hands of the enemy when we left, because Trump used that expensive drone technology that the taxpayers paid for to keep our enemies pinned down, to cover our retreat. And he used his unpredictability as a tool in his international negotiating skills. So, the Russians, the Chinese, our adversaries, they thought, well, maybe he's a little crazy. Maybe he really would bomb us back to oblivion if we invaded Ukraine or if we tried to take Taiwan.
Well, speaking of that, Hamas today is already calling for peace.
Yeah, because they know we have a president again. We have a tough guy again who will, if he has to, use American power. Look, they viewed Joe Biden as a patsy. They viewed him as a weakling. They saw what happened in Afghanistan. That emboldened them. They realized that if you attack the United States or one of our allies, Joe Biden's response would be to write you a strong letter of protest. And they recognized that Trump would not be afraid to use American power, and therefore he was able to preserve the peace. This is not a new strategy. Trump is a is a throwback to the policies of Dwight Eisenhower, who was one of our greatest presidents. We had unprecedented peace and prosperity. Also, Ronald Reagan. Instead of going around the world looking for wars to get into, where we don't really have any interest, instead we let our adversaries know that we are strong and you shouldn't mess with us. And they looked Trump in the eye and they realized he meant it. So I think we're going to have a golden age here. I think we have a unique opportunity to fix everything that's wrong with this country, and no one can say that Trump doesn't have a broad mandate to do it. I mean, this was not just a beating; he delivered an ass kicking to Kamala. This was a total rout. Even though the polls, which are suspect, showed it being very close.
Roger, if you're looking at the screen right now, this shows how America voted. This is the breakdown of counties across America. I mean, it's red shellacked all over the place, East Coast, West Coast. You know, to see all the swing states flip red. Was there any particular state that surprised you that wow, I'm surprised Pennsylvania flipped. You surprised that Michigan flipped, Wisconsin, Georgia. Were you surprised at any of these swing states that flipped?
No, I actually thought that we would ultimately win all of them. But if you look at other places, there's interesting trends. I'll give you an example. We lost New Jersey by 5 points.
That's it.
We spent no money in New Jersey.
Wow.
The president didn't visit there. We didn't campaign there. We had a ragtag group of really tough guys in the America First movement, Mike Crispy and others, who basically ran their own campaign for the president and held rallies in every county and organized, but they weren't given any resources. They kind of did it on their own. We came within 5 points in one of the bluest states in the country. Sure, Kamala carried New York, but we held on to all of our House seats there. They didn't flip one of them, and Trump ran substantially stronger there than he had in 2020 or even 2016. So even in the blue states, pardon me, the margin came up.
Illinois, where I'm originally from in Chicago, the margin of victory there was a lot smaller than it was in 2020. Is Illinois one of those states that you potentially can foresee potentially flipping one of these years, one of these election cycles?
Well, as you may or may not know, the governor of Illinois has now decided to make the same mistake. By the way, I don't know if you've met Pritzker, if you've ever seen him. I met this guy on the corner of 31st, 32nd, and 33rd Street. I mean, this guy's so fat he's got his own zip code. It's unbelievable. But they've recently adopted the New York State's policies of no bail. So violent criminals, people who attack people in the streets, people who assault the elderly, they let them right back out on the street immediately.
That's right.
Chicago, which used to be referred to as a city that works, doesn't work anymore. The African-American mayor there recently said that all of the city's problems were caused by Richard Nixon. Sorry, but Richard Nixon hasn't been president for over 50 years. What is this madman talking about? The problems are caused by their soft on crime policies, in which criminals know that they can commit crimes and there'll be no consequences. My friend Rod Blagojevich, a great man who was politically targeted, guy did nothing whatsoever wrong. What he refused to do was appoint the person that Barack Obama wanted appointed to the U.S. Senate seat
when he vacated.
Was vacating.
Right.
So when the guy wouldn't play ball, wouldn't do as he was told, they jacked him up, sent him to jail for 8 years. 8 years. And he would have been in there much longer, but Donald Trump commuted his sentence. This guy is so popular. He is so beloved. He was such a good governor, never raised taxes, that they passed state law to make sure that he could never run for office again.
Wow.
That's how much they fear him.
Yeah.
And a Democrat who supported Donald Trump in the last election because he's got common sense. You see, it wasn't always this way. There was a time in America when both parties believed in capitalism. They believed in free enterprise. They were both patriotic. They both thought we needed a strong national defense. Sure, it's true that the Democrats wanted to spend more and tax more. And the Republicans, at least theoretically, until Bush, W. Bush, wanted to spend less and tax less. But in truth, the old Democrat Party, the party of Truman and Kennedy and Roosevelt, has been taken over by people who follow Marx and Lenin. So the moderate Democrat, that's an oxymoron. There are no moderate Democrats. And there's a realignment going on in America in which Republicans like Dick Cheney, who lied us into war in Iraq. He said Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. No, they didn't. He said they had yellow cake uranium with which to build nuclear bombs. No, they didn't. And he said they were responsible for the attack on America on 9/11. They had no involvement in that. Now, his company, Halliburton, from which he had taken a leave of absence and taken his stock and put it into a blind trust, but how blind could it be if he knew it was in there, right?
Right.
They're the ones who got the contracts, multi-million dollar no-bid contracts for that war.
Yeah, the military-industrial complex by him, yep.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, he supported Kamala. John McCain, who, his son supported Kamala. Little Adam Kinzinger had it up to here with that guy. He supported Kamala. So the warmongers, the globalists, they've all gravitated to the Democrats, whereas Bobby Kennedy, Tulsi Gabbard, Rod Blagojevich, common sense Democrats, centrist Democrats, well, they supported Donald Trump because they're against war. Yep. They're against censorship. They're for free speech. And they want America to be healthy again. They want to look hard at the processed food that they're poisoning us with. I think there's a great realignment going on.
Roger, let me ask you this question. When I'm seeing the exit polls, let me share this one last. The exit polls in terms of which demographic, ethnic demographics, gender demographics, was increasing from last election to this election. Let me see if I can share this with you. It was surprising for me to see how many different ethnic groups, multicultural ethnic groups, were increasing their voter base to the Republican Party. We're looking at, let's see here it is. You look at the Latino community, 46% Trump. It's never been that high. Asian, other, even the black vote, higher than normal. Why do you, you're known as getting people to vote the way you want them to vote. Why don't you think more of the black vote isn't voting yet for the Republican, the red side?
Well, first of all, let's be clear. I'm not sure that I think that these exit polls are accurate. In this particular graphic you're showing me, I think Trump's percentage of black voters is greatly understated.
Huh, interesting.
I think he's closer to 20%, which would be historic, by the way. I also think he took an absolute majority of Hispanic Latinos. It's only a narrow majority, but recognizing that George W. Bush was the previous high watermark at 38%, I think Trump ultimately took an absolute majority. Here's the point. It doesn't matter whether you're black or white or Asian or what you are. What do you want?
Yeah.
You want a prosperous nation. You want job opportunities. You want affordable housing. You want safe neighborhoods. Sure. You want good schools. You want the same thing that all voters want. Yeah. And therefore, these key demographics that have been the bedrock of the Democrat Party, they're moving our way because of the dismal performance of Joe Biden, literally the worst president in American history. Jimmy Carter can now die a happy man because he no longer has to wear that label. And Kamala Harris, whose whole argument as to why we should elect her is because Trump is Hitler and everybody who supports him is a Nazi.
Right.
That's not much of an uplifting, inspiring closing argument, is it?
No, it's not. I want to transition to business. When I'm looking at the 4 stages of fame from a marketing and branding standpoint, let's say you're working together with a new candidate, and I think one of the most interesting thing about Trump was that he owed nobody anything. He made his own money. He was known by The Apprentice for 12 seasons, 13 seasons, and to see him where he was, everybody knew his name. And you made, I think, the comparison with you might know Mark Rubio because you're in Florida, but take him outside of Florida, nobody knows who Marco Rubio is. But everybody knew Donald Trump. And you talk about, who is Roger Stone? Get me Roger Stone. Get me somebody like Roger Stone. And who is Roger Stone? Can you explain that breakdown?
Sure. Those are the 4 stages of fame for somebody who becomes nationally known. So it begins with, who is Roger Stone? Get me Roger Stone. Get me a Roger Stone type. And then, of course, at the end, back to who is Roger Stone. You make a good point, though, and that is the apprentice is what catapults Trump from being relatively well-known nationally to being extremely well-known. And if you think about it, see, the people in politics are too elitist to recognize that the average person doesn't distinguish between reality TV and entertainment programming. So here's what they know. They see Trump. He's in the high back chair. His hair is perfect. He's perfectly lit. He's perfectly made up. He's in command, making decisions. You're fired. You're hired. You're done. Yeah. And they say, well, I like that guy, Trump. So in a way, The Apprentice turbocharged Trump's celebrity. Now, this is a guy who works very, very hard at branding, puts his name on everything that he sells or promotes, and this is what made him a national figure. Now, in a presidential campaign, normally, particularly if you're a dark horse, or if you're a long shot, you have to become well known before you can then tell people what you stand for, because otherwise they don't know who you are. Trump gets to skip that entire first step. From the beginning, everyone knows who Donald Trump is. He's that brash New York billionaire who's a straight talker, and he tells you exactly what he thinks. So he's able to use that celebrity to get into the big race right from the beginning. In 1988, we're sitting in his office. He's reading the New York Times. I had met him in 1979 when I was sent to New York to organize Governor Ronald Reagan's campaign. I had responsibility for New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And I had gotten a meeting with him, and I had pitched him on Ronald Reagan. And he asked me many, many detailed questions before he agreed to raise $100,000. And he and his father both joined our finance committee. And then we became good friends. After Reagan's election, I elected not to go into the government. I'm not a government guy. And I opened a public affairs firm, and he was among our first clients. We became very good friends. I was at his wedding to Melania. I actually knew Melania when they were dating.
Oh, wow.
Before they were married. I knew his previous wife, Ivana. He was at my wedding when my wife and I got married in Washington, D.C. And we were very good friends. And in 1988, sitting in his office, he's going through the New York Times, and he says, wow, George Bush and Michael Dukakis, what a couple of losers. Got to be somebody better. Has to be somebody better. I said, oh, no, there definitely is. Well, who is it? We should get behind them. I said, well, I was thinking about you. He said, what do you mean? I'm a real estate guy. I said, no, you're far more than a real estate guy. You have very strong opinions on the lousy trade deals we're making, the fact that our NATO allies aren't paying their fair share for their defense. You think the government's very poorly run. They waste millions, billions of dollars. So he said, you really think I could do this? I said, you could definitely do it. I said, let me ask you a question. Are any of these guys who are running smarter than you are? He said, definitely not. So there you go. So he said, well, how can we test this? I said, let's take a trip to New Hampshire. I'll get an invitation from a Rotary Club or a Chamber of Commerce, I think it was, in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And you just go up there, and you don't have to work from prepared remarks. Trump hates prepared remarks. He likes to talk off the cuff.
Nice.
And let's just see what the reaction is. And we went up, and I remember this. Vice President George Bush had spoken in this same venue for the Chamber of Commerce, and it was a sellout, meaning there were 300 people. Donald Trump had 1,500 people outside waiting for his helicopter to land, the black helicopter. And he was a smash hit. It was the first time I saw the Trump electricity, in a political context.
What year was this?
You either have that charisma or you don't.
And he had that
it's like
pull.
when I said to him, when I first met him in 1980, when I got an appointment with him, he said, "Well, I wondered when you were going to come." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, they've all been here. I mean, George Bush, Howard Baker, John Connolly. I met them all. So what did you think of him?" He said, "I had no idea Howard Baker was so short." I said, "What about John Connolly, the former Texas governor?" He said, "After I shook that guy's hand, I had to count my fingers."
Wow.
I said, "What about George Bush?" He said, "The guy's got a handshake like a fish. Who would vote for this guy?" And I pitched him hard on Reagan, and he said, "Your man's going to win." I said, "Why do you say that?" Trump said, "Because he has the look. See, we live in the television age. He's got the look."
Yeah.
And then he says to me, "I've got the look," meaning him, "but I don't want to run for president." And I'm thinking to myself, yet.
What year is this, Roger?
That was 1979.
79. Wow. So he's had some of these aspirations. So speaking of the look, I want to talk to you about building a powerful personal brand so people can get known. So a lot of entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, watch our channel, and you've been a significant figure in American politics for decades. I mean, what was the significance for you in terms of Goldwater? Why does he resonate with you so much?
Well, so here's the thing. I grew up outside of New York City in Connecticut, but in a very rural area. So there were no kids my age, for 25 miles. Well, what does that mean? That means no basketball, no baseball, no football, no team sports. But you needed to pursue athletic activities that you could do by yourself. So I started lifting weights. I started doing long distance running, two things you can do by yourself. But there were no kids around my age, so I became a voracious reader.
Wow.
And I read mostly history and biography. But the woman who lived next door to us was a very active Republican. And she gave me a copy of this book, Conscience of a Conservative by Barry Goldwater. And I devoured this book, and then I realized after I read it, well, I'm a conservative. In other words, I want small, inobtrusive government. And I want the government to stay out of my private life and out of my business. I want maximum personal freedom. I want a strong national defense, but also as a deterrent to our enemies, as opposed to the neocons who go around the world looking for war. I was a staunch anti-communist. I'm half Italian and I'm half Hungarian. I am Italian from the waist down, but I'd seen what the communists. I'd seen what the communists had done in Hungary, the way they had crushed the Hungarian people. So I was an ardent anti-communist. Before I read this book, I wanted to be an actor. My parents said, "You're going to starve to death. Come on, you got to become a plumber, an electrician, a drywall guy, something like that." And then after I read the book, I realized that politics was, show business for ugly people. So I wanted to be in politics. From that moment, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. I toyed earlier when I was younger about being a candidate myself, but I don't suffer fools all that gladly. And you have to be able to shake hands with morons and so on. So I'm not good at that. So then I decided that's really not the part of it I want to be in. I became interested in the management of politics and the idea of how you communicate to the voters to win their votes. I mean, people don't realize that politics, a successful campaign is a very scientific, data-driven campaign. Candidates come to me all the time. They say, "I've got a great chance to win this race." I say, "Okay, great. Show me your benchmark poll." "Oh, we didn't take a poll. I know what the people think." I said, "You know what I call people like that? Losers." That's what I call them, and most of the time they lose. So in the beginning of any campaign, you take a very large sample benchmark poll in which you are very careful not to bias the questions, not to word them in a way to get a desired result, but to word them in a totally neutral way. You can test positive and negative themes, but you do that after you've tested the ballot. Otherwise, you're going to taint the ballot. So if I said, Joe Smith has never paid federal income tax in his entire life, and he beats his wife, and then does that make you more or less likely to vote for Joe Smith? And then in the next question, would you vote for Joe Smith or Sam Brown? Well, I've just cooked my poll, if you see what I'm saying.
Got it.
So we call it order bias, but you avoid order bias. And then in that benchmark poll, you take the opportunity to test everything that you want to know about what people's priorities are, what views change their opinions, what positions move them to your candidate, move them to your opponent, and so on. And then you're basing all of your advertising decisions on that document, on that initial research. Now, you might go back and repoll later in the campaign, but what I say to candidates is running a campaign without taking a benchmark poll is like driving a car with your eyes closed.
Wow.
I mean, you will definitely go forward when you hit the gas, but you'll never know what you might hit. Right. So, this is a very data-driven scientific exercise. And then one of the most important things you're going to ask in your poll is, where do you get your information? So the voters, they used to tell you, well, they got most of their information from network television. And then that began to drop off. And then most voters got their information from cable television. We now see that receding. Some voters get their information from radio. That's remained pretty static, and it's also a very good and relatively inexpensive way compared to television and cable to advertise. But of course now, a vast majority of their people getting their news from the internet. Okay, so now you break that down. Okay, you say the internet, but where on the internet? What specific sites on the internet? And that's how you know how to spend your campaign dollars. Now, once you figure that out, and you figure out what your whole budget is, working backwards from election day, you lay out your budget, and you'll know when to begin your paid media. Maybe you only have 3 weeks. Maybe you only have 4 weeks. Maybe you have 6 weeks. But whatever you do has to be sustained. You can't turn a campaign on, then turn it off for the summer and turn it back on. It doesn't work that way. That's really how it's done. I mean, I'm trying to make it as obviously as simplistic as possible. I still see, for example, driving in my home state of Florida, from Miami all the way to Jacksonville, I still see Trump billboards, and I scratch my head and say, why in the world would you spend any money on a billboard? I mean, a billboard can only tell you one thing, the candidate's name. Well, Donald Trump already has 98% name ID, right?
Yep.
You might be able to squeeze Make America Great in there, but you can't convince anybody through a billboard. There's no persuasion in a billboard. I don't use them. I don't recommend candidates use them. People love them. They're like yard signs. I did a campaign in Ukraine for a minor pro-Western Democrat party that was seeking to win the minimum number of seats in their unicameral legislature called the Rada. And if your party got 20 seats, you got a seat at the table, right? So, they're behind us technologically. They're not as wired. This was, in the 90s. And I said, look, what we need here are yard signs. They're like, what? I said, yard signs. What are you talking about? I said, you take our candidate's name, we put it on a sign, we put it in people's front yards. Comrade is genius. This is genius. Yard signs. So, I mean, these things that we take for granted that are kind of a staple in American politics, you take them to another country and it's the first time they've ever seen them.
You're right.
Now, look, nobody ever won because they had more yard signs than the other candidate.
Sure.
But if you don't have them, then your volunteers and your supporters, they don't think your campaign's doing well. I know people put all their money into yard signs. You know what happened? They lost. Losers.
So how have you seen the advent of long-form podcast? Because we were at the PBD election party on Tuesday night, and we were the number one watched election show in the entire internet. We're beating Daily Wire, we're beating Charlie Kirk, we're beating Benny Johnson, we're beating all the broadcast networks. 297,000 live streaming watching the PBD podcast. We're on the panel there having a conversation about what's going on in the elections. Where do you see long-form podcast in the mix now of creating a personal brand and getting the voters or entrepreneurs, getting potential customers in the mix of campaigning, getting the word out?
Well, clearly becoming more important. I mean, first thing, the best thing about our mutual friend Patrick Bet-David is his shows are always lively and interesting.
Yeah.
He has great guests and he keeps it moving. He asks tough questions. You see, here's the thing. The only thing worse in politics, worse than being wrong, is to be boring. Right? If you're boring, what happens? Well, people are going to look elsewhere. Patrick, his programming is never boring. That's why people go there. And you guys had to have a great show to keep the audience, otherwise they'd start looking around, right? So I think the fact that you saw Trump move very aggressively into long-form podcast interviews is a testimony to the fact that his team recognized this was a new way to expose him to voters in an all-natural way. And he's a great storyteller. He's a great raconteur. He's very interesting. He's brash. He's not scripted. He's not tight. He's not managed. He's not handled. He's like the real deal, right? He's authentic and he's genuine. And this is why he got elected. I mean, look, managing him is extraordinarily difficult because he won't be managed. He's a wild animal. He's a free spirit. He's a force of nature. He's his own man. And, sometimes he talks for 2 hours, but you know what? The people love it.
Yeah.
And we saw the results of that last Tuesday when he won a crushing victory over Kamala.
And he spoke at 2 o'clock in the morning for another 30, 45 minutes. It's just crazy to see the type of endurance he has. I mean, the type of stops he made, the interviews he was doing compared to Kamala. Let me ask you this. What's the key now, Roger? What's the key to getting people to buy into a movement? He had the MAGA movement. What's the key thing to getting people to buy into a message, whether it's politics or in business?
Well, I think it's the same. What's the benefit? In other words, in your pitch, you need to tell people what the benefit is to them. That's what they want to know. I read a book. In 1966, I was involved in my first campaign where I had any real responsibility. It was a state Senate race in Connecticut, working for a guy named John Lupton, who was a great candidate. And the campaign manager was a guy named Howard Long, who was a Madison Avenue advertising guy right out of Mad Men. He'd take the train, from New York out to New Canaan, and he wore these skinny black ties, and he drank these vodka martinis, and he smoked these little cigarillos. And I learned more from this guy just watching him in this campaign. And he recommended a book to me. It's called Confessions of an Advertising Man by David Ogilvy. You can find it. It's in paperback. It's a business book staple. When people come to work for me, the first thing I do is give them a copy of this book and say, read it. Now, the book was written in 1963, but it doesn't matter because everything in it is transferable. So the chapter entitled How to Illustrate a Poster would now today be called How to Build Your Home Site, your home website.
Wow.
But everything in this book is transferable to modern technology. This is, other than the Bible and my own book, Stone's Rules, this is the most important book that I've read.
So you even put together the framework of how to get your advertising done. Is that what you're extracting from the Confessions of an Advertising Man? Is that the name of the book?
Well, it's one of the many things. I mean, it's for example, I see people put in their signs, let's say, vote Roger J. Stone Jr. Republican primary, August 27th. I know, just put the name. The name. If you can't see the name from 25 feet away, then you kind of failed in the mission. Yep. It's basic. It's very basic stuff. But the key to selling anything is what's the benefit to the buyer. Tell the buyer what the potential benefit is to them. Build the wall, for example. My first book was about the Kennedy assassination. And it became a New York Times bestseller. And my publisher obviously knew more about publishing books than I did. My original title was something, like Destiny in Dallas or something, I thought was fetching. And the publisher said, no, you have to tell people in the title of the book what the book is about if you want them to buy it. Now my book is entitled The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ. and it became a New York Times best-selling book like that. I took it to 6 different publishers. They all said, no one will read this book. Nobody's interested in this. You're crazy. I said, no, this is what I want. Now, if you go out and buy this book, let me remind you to buy the paperback because it has 3 additional chapters. Because after I published the hard copy, I got so much incoming information from people who knew more about the situation. And once I vetted that information, I put it back out in paperback with 3 extra chapters. I also hated the cover of the hardcover, which had been designed by my publisher, and I did my own cover for the paperback. But this was one of the most important things I learned. The book title told you everything you needed to know about what the book was about. So did Lyndon Johnson kill John Kennedy? Boy, there's something I'd like to know about. And the book still sells extremely well today. By the way, you can go to stonezone.com in the store, and you get a signed copy. Or you can go to Amazon and give your money to a multinational corporation that hates your guts.
But I'm just curious, do you think that the next 4 years will see a more antitrust movement, breaking up Amazon, breaking up Google, breaking up Facebook, breaking up Apple? Do you foresee that prediction?
I certainly hope so. Look, here's what I think happened. During Trump's 4 years in the White House, he wanted to do those things. And he went to the acting attorney general, Rod Rosenstein, who always said the same thing. Yes, sir, we're working on it. But they weren't working on it. They were stalling because they intended and planned to do nothing. And they knew that Trump would get distracted with bigger issues like war and peace and the economy and so on. But just the fact that Google was sending voter reminders to people who were Democrats or Democrat-leaning independents, but wasn't sending out any of these voter reminders to Republicans, that's putting your thumb on the scale, for example. Google is the single greatest offender. Go do, before the election, if you did a Google News search on Donald Trump, why are the first 5 pages of stories all negative? Every single one of them is a hit piece. How can that be? Well, it's designed to be that way. So yes, I think that there has been too much power centralized in specific tech companies, and I do think they're in violation of antitrust laws in many cases.
Yeah, because you're talking about an advertising budget. I mean, if you're going to advertise online, you're advertising on YouTube, Google, you're advertising on Facebook, Instagram, which is Meta.
But what if they won't sell you advertising?
That's right.
So Meta, particularly, I mean, if you're a Republican candidate for Congress, Facebook isn't selling you ads. You're not licensed. We won't give you the permission. Why the House Republican Campaign Committee hasn't sued the snot out of Facebook, I have no idea. First thing I would have done. So, and I could make an argument that that's an illegal corporate contribution as well. So that's the amazing thing about Trump's victory is the whole system is rigged against him. It's not just the old media, you know, the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal, all of whose print editions now lose money. So they're making their money online. People going to see the Wall Street Journal online. They don't realize it's not the old Wall Street Journal, but it's now owned by communist Chinese interests. Or here, my favorite one is Newsweek. That's not Newsweek magazine, folks. That company went out of business. That Newsweek masthead that you're so familiar with, that belongs to the Daily Beast. And people at the Daily Beast, they lie for a living. I mean, one thing you know for certain about the Daily Beast, nothing printed there is either accurate or true. They just say whatever they want. So it is amazing that given the fact that the mass media, which still has huge influence, was arrayed against Trump, the government was working against Trump, the government is pressuring all of these news outlets to censor Trump and his supporters. I mean, to this day, you can find me on X. I'm Roger J. Stone Jr., Roger J. Stone Jr. I'm verified. I was banned in 2017. I had 980,000 followers when I was banned. I filled out a form to ask the new management under Elon Musk to restore my page, my profile. I never dreamed that would be approved. And when I got back on, First of all, I had a large number of bots following me. But then additionally, I dropped to 25,000 people. That was it, 25,000 followers. And I think I just broke 700 recently. And I've been steadily building, I'm very grateful to Elon Musk for giving me my voice back. But I'm still banned for life on Facebook. I'm still banned for life on Instagram. I'm banned for life on TikTok, but I don't really care because I don't really want the red Chinese to have everything that's in my phone. Now you can go to Facebook right now, and there's several Roger Stones. They're selling crypto, they're hiring people for jobs, they're doing all kinds of
Catfish
stuff,
accounts,
collecting financial information. Folks, none of those people are me. None of them. I was in a restaurant not long ago, and a guy came up to me and said, "Hey, you never sent me that crypto I bought from you." I said, "What are you talking about?" So it's worse than you think. I'm not allowed to be there, but other people are allowed to be there using my name with a false identity. And then if I have my lawyers contact, the company, they eventually take them down. But guess what? They pop up 2 days later. Now they're Roger Stone 1234.
Right.
Or whatever
and doing
mutation of my name. So there's no way. It's like whack-a-mole.
Yeah, that's right.
It's outrageous.
Roger, you've faced your share of challenges. I mean, the networks have called you a dirty trickster. You've dealt with legal battles. You've dealt with media scrutiny. How do you stay focused and continue to reinvent yourself and get to 700,000 on Twitter, even in the face of adversity?
Well, first of all, what I hate is when they say Roger Stone, the self-described dirty trickster. I have never described myself that way. I've been described that way by Democrats, mostly Democrats that I have beaten in fair elections. Secondarily, one man's dirty trick is another man's civic participation. Everything's in the eye of the beholder. I was targeted in the Mueller investigation. If you read some of these crazy stories, you would say, "Oh, he worked with the Russians," or he was collaborated with WikiLeaks. That's all nonsense. The government never proved any of those things. Never even had any evidence that proved them. So really, they framed me for process crimes. They said that I lied about Russian collusion under oath. My testimony was voluntary, and to violate the False Statements Act, the lie has to not only be willful, but it has to be material. In other words, you have to lie to cover up some crime. Well, there is no crime. There was no Russian collusion. We now know that definitively. So I was charged because I've been a friend of Donald Trump for 45 years. I was charged so they could squeeze me to try to make me be like Michael Cohen, that weasel, and lie about Trump to try to destroy him. And I refused to do that. And I don't regret that decision. So, look, you have to be a little provocative. You have to be a little interesting. You have to be a little out there to get attention in an increasingly competitive marketplace. The people who are boring, nobody follows them on X. People have nothing to say. I've now written 6 books. I'm working on 2 more. I can defend anything I've ever written. It's interesting. I saw the other day people arguing about who broke the Epstein story. Who broke the Epstein story? Was it this guy Weinstein? He said he broke it. And some people think Alex Jones broke it. The first guy to write about Epstein was a reporter named Nick Bryan. He was an investigative journalist. He's a great investigative journalist. He's not a liberal or a conservative. He's kind of like right down the middle. What are the facts? But I took what he wrote and I published it with attribution in my book, The Clintons' War on Women. It's the longest chapter in the book. So I'm the first major author in the country to write about Epstein. Now I go online and I say, oh, well, this 4chan says Roger Stone was seen on Epstein's Island and he was wearing a bull mask, but we know it was him because of the Nixon tattoo on his back. Now, if anybody wants to put their name on that claim, I will sue you in a heartbeat. But no, it's always, an unidentified chauffeur. It's all bullshit. That's what it is.
Sure. Now, about the Russian collusion hoax, which is now a hoax. What do you think Trump is going to, what's his disposition? I don't know if you have a beat on it. I know you don't answer questions, hypotheticals, but with now Trump back in office, what do you think is going to happen with everybody that lied, made that all up? What do you think is going to happen there?
Well, look, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm certainly not a prosecutor, and I don't speak for Donald Trump, and make that very clear. I do think there are people there who willfully engaged in treasonous activity. Pardon me. The point, of course, is that they knew that the Steele dossier, this famous report which alleged that Donald Trump had cavorted with Russian prostitutes when he visited Moscow, they knew that was completely fabricated. Or the claim that the Russians hacked the Democrat National Committee and that information went to WikiLeaks. I'm sorry, but that's not true. There is no evidence of that. The FBI admitted in my case, in the pretrial motions, they never inspected the computer servers at the DNC. So how could they know that? Well, we relied on a report from CrowdStrike, a third-party IT company. So my defense lawyer said, okay, let's see that report. No, the judge said, you can't have it. Well, we now know that there's nothing in that report that proves the Russians hacked the DNC. It's a complete farce. It's made up. So if information was stolen from the DNC, which it clearly was because WikiLeaks published it, the download times in the forensic evidence demonstrate that it was downloaded to a portable drive and taken out the back door. It wasn't an online hack. Yet most people, and people will see this and say, oh, no, the Russians definitely had. No, they didn't. There's no evidence of that whatsoever. Now, in my trial, I wanted to produce expert testimony and forensic evidence to prove that there was no hack of the DNC. The judge, of course, would not allow that. So this is the greatest single dirty trick in American politics, the Russian collusion hoax. It's the use of the full authority of the U.S. government and the capability of our intelligence agencies to illegitimately remove a duly elected president. That's a treasonous crime. So, yeah, I think guys like John Brennan or FBI Director Comey, I think these guys were engaged in treasonous crimes. It would be up to a jury to decide that. It's not up to me to decide it, but that's my opinion. Will it be prosecuted? Probably not. I mean, John Durham, the special counsel who investigated all this, what took him so long? Why did it take him 5 years to publish a report? We already knew everything in there. Well, that's because the statute of limitations ran out at 5 years. So Hillary Clinton, who was in on it, Barack Obama, who was in on it, Joe Biden, who was in on it, our current national security advisor, he was in on it. They were all in on it, but nobody will be prosecuted, in my opinion.
You know, it's just crazy to think now that with Trump going into office, Hamas already asking for peace, 2 days after he wins the election, and then he doesn't have to fight off for his survivability, hopefully this next 4 years. Because as soon as he got into office, he was already fighting off impeachment. This time he can really get to work and shake some trees and get things done.
But if you looked at the home site, the homepage of CNN, you saw the beginnings of yet another Russian collusion. Oh, the Russian interference.
Here we go again.
So, and when you go back, what you see is, well, the intelligence agencies have it. Okay, show me the proof. They never show you the proof. We have reason to believe. That's not proof. That's a claim. And I think that this was such an ass kicking. This was such a mandate. No one thinks this election was stolen. And no one thought that Trump won because he's a racist or because he appealed to toxic male masculinity. This is nonsensical. He won because he did a better job managing the country when he was president, and the people who are managing the country right now have done an abysmal, terrible job.
Yeah. I mean, it's horrible. It's the common person today. You talk about paycheck to paycheck. It's worse than that, and people have zero financial control. And I'm going to talk about that. So, you're no stranger to controversy, Roger. I mean, you remained a relevant figure in politics for many decades. So how can businesses And how can entrepreneurs, leverage controversy to their advantage? How can they spin it in their direction without damaging their own brand?
Well, it's a complicated question, but I guess the real answer is that above all, you have to be interesting. If you're not interesting, you bore people, then they start to look elsewhere. So, if you ever read my book, Stone's Rules, I basically say all press is good press as long as they spell your name right. Better to be infamous than to never be famous at all. And it's interesting. We both are carrying around the same cold. I went to Madison Square Garden, the most incredible rally I've ever seen. It was a Nazi rally. It was a Nazi. How come I saw so many people waving the Israeli flag and wearing yarmulkes at this Nazi rally? This is a craziness. This was the most diverse crowd of people you've ever seen. Black people, white people, Spanish people, Asian people, young people, old people. It was a very diverse crowd. But they say, it was to evoke the Nazi rallies of 1939. Really? Bill Clinton got nominated in Madison Square Garden. Jimmy Carter got nominated in Madison Square Garden. John F. Kennedy's famous birthday celebration, in which Marilyn Monroe wears this really sexy see-through dress and sings "Happy Birthday, Mr. President," Madison Square Garden. So these people are insane. They had no message. They have no plan. It's all about vilification. It's all about hate. They are the haters. See, this is the thing about the American left. Everything they say we are doing, they are doing themselves. AOC, the bartender, now worth $15 million. How does that work, by the way? So she went, became a member of Congress, and on a member of Congress's salary, she's now worth $15 million. Interesting. She says Donald Trump is going to use the military to attack U.S. citizens, and he's going to lock up his political opponents. Well, wait a minute, isn't that what they just tried to do to Donald Trump in New York? I mean, it's all backwards. That same week, the same week that Kamala Harris said Trump is going to use the military to attack his political opponents, the U.S. Department of Defense released a directive which, for the first time, they gave the military the authority to use lethal force against U.S. citizens. So once again, the thing they're accusing us of doing, which we're not doing and have no plans to do, they're doing themselves.
I think one of the stars that really sticks out to me is very interesting to your point that came out of this whole election cycle is Vivek Ramaswamy. He is very interesting. So how would you break down his archetype if you're looking at his
I had him
situation?
on my 77 WABC radio show in New York. I like the guy a lot. He's got Donald Trump's act down almost perfectly. He's kind of new, and therefore I'd like to see him over a longer period of time. Made a lot of money in the vaccination business. That's not necessarily bad, but I didn't like the fact that he kind of got caught copying, Barack Obama's shtick of who's that funny-looking skinny guy with the funny last name. But he's clearly very talented, and he didn't get many votes, but he did capture the public imagination. He was smart enough to see that within the Republican Party, instead of attacking Trump, the way to be popular was to support Trump. So even when he was running himself, he was defending Trump and supporting Trump. Was pretty smart in terms of his long-term brand development. I hope Trump puts him in the cabinet in some position. I think he could prove himself, and he could be president someday.
What type of cabinet role do you think is most fitting for him?
Well, it's hard to say. Secretary of Commerce would be a place I think he'd be terrific. I'll tell you the real standout of this campaign, though, and that's Tulsi Gabbard. She was a Democrat. Now, this is a woman, 4-term Democrat congressman from Hawaii, lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve, combat veteran in both Kuwait and Iraq, a vice chairman of the Democrat National Committee until she saw them steal the nomination from Bernie Sanders. Supported Sanders because he was anti-war, and she recognized that Hillary Clinton was pro-war. She's now become a Republican. She's become one of the most eloquent and articulate supporters of Donald Trump, but more importantly, critics of the war machine that now controls the Democrat Party. Tulsi Gabbard is going to be president someday. In fact, I think that she's likely to be your first woman president.
Wow. Wow. You heard it here from Roger Stone. When you're looking at some of those powerful leaders in the world, you've been around a lot of personalities, a lot of characteristics. What leadership qualities do you think are essential for anyone that's leading a message, leaving and building a legacy? What do you think are some of those essential leadership qualities that you see from your position?
Persistence, resilience. Look, everybody knows I have a tattoo of Nixon on my back, right? People say, that's kind of weird. Not really. What it is it's a reminder every day that it's not how many times you get knocked down that matters, it's how many times you get up. That in life, when things don't go your way, when you have setbacks, when you see defeats, when you face disappointments, when you strive to reach for something but you fall short again and again, you don't give up, that you get back in the ring, you get back in the fight. So the story of Nixon for me is a story of persistence. It's a story of resilience. It's an American story. These are the qualities that I admire in Donald Trump. I mean, think about the stress and the pressure of knowing on one day, at the end of this day, I'm going to know one of two things. Either I'm going to lose everything I own, they're going to destroy my reputation, and I'm going to die in prison, the subject of ridicule, or I'm going to have the opportunity to be among the greatest presidents this country's ever had. And in the next 24 hours, I'm going to know which way it goes. And you drive to the result you want through hard work and persistence. I can't even imagine the stress. And look, I went through very stressful times, very difficult times for my family and I. I'm convinced that my wife's cancer diagnosis right after the time I was pardoned is the product of the enormous stress of being hounded by a nasty set of federal prosecutors who had no real case against me but wanted to pressure me to turn on Trump. I'm convinced that cancer, from which I thank God she is now cancer-free, that was induced by the stress. And I went from making a very comfortable living to having nothing. I mean, I lost our home, I lost our savings, lost our insurance, lost my car, had to sell my electric guitar. That killed me. We lost everything. But here's the thing. It was in that time that I made a decision to renew my faith, to return to the blood of the cross, to be redeemed. It took some time. Initially, a number of people told me, friends, that's what I needed to do. I needed to turn this burden over to God. And I was trying, but I wasn't feeling it. I would read the Bible, but I wasn't feeling it. And then I had an opportunity to meet Franklin Graham, because we had a mutual friend, and I kind of told him how I felt, and he said, look, you may think that you can go to Trump and get executive clemency, and I'll look into that, but what you really need to do is you need to turn your burden back over to the Lord. You need to clean up your life. You need to confess your sins. You need to get right with God. Are you a Christian, Mr. Stone? I said, yes, sir, I am. I'm a Catholic, as a matter of fact. He said, well, I prefer if you were a Baptist, but that's good that you believe in the birth, death, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Embrace your faith. Call on the Lord to save you. Call on the Lord to lift you up, and I believe that he will save you from your persecutors. Now, when I did that, I must tell you, my life changed in every way possible.
Wow.
It was like like cement blocks being lifted from your shoulders. Now, when I did that, I was attacked in the Washington Monthly, who said that my profession of faith was an act or a fraud. How would they know? See, I don't care what they think. I only care what he thinks. You can't lie to God. It won't work. And I'm not perfect. God knows I am not perfect. I'm certainly not a saint. I'm not. Some people think I'm a prophet. I'm not a prophet. But I am now, in my view, just a soldier in the army of God. Here's what I learned. God doesn't tell you his entire plan at once. God kind of reveals his plan to you as you need to know it. And if you're smart enough to pray over big decisions, if you're smart enough to open the Bible, see, I just thought it was like a book of fables. It was hard to understand. It was written kind of an ancient idiom that I had trouble understanding. I didn't realize until I really got into it how incredibly practical the Bible is. The answer to everything you want to know is in there somewhere. You just need a guide, and you need to take some time. You need somebody who knows more about it than you do to guide you through it. So even though I'm baptized as a Catholic, and had all my holy sacraments as a Catholic, and I consider myself a Catholic, I go to Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church because when I went to the local Catholic church one Sunday, a woman spit on me because she didn't like my politics. And she said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "What do you mean, lady? It's a church.
Church, hello.
It's open to anybody who believes."
Right.
And that was it for me. I wasn't going there anymore. And I go to Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church, was founded by Dr. D. James Kennedy, who was a great friend of Ronald Reagan's, one of the early evangelical pastors, and was actually dedicated by the great Billy Graham, one of the greatest men of the 20th century. We have a dynamic young pastor, Rob Pacenza, who's from Philadelphia, is a great orator, a great apostle for Christ, and I feel at home there. So you may think I don't mean you, but I mean people may say that's corny or that's a head fake or that's an act. You know what? I don't really care what they think. I only care what he thinks.
Amen. I was about to ask about that because I was listening to some of your interviews with Patrick of you reaffirming your faith in Christ, and being called a person acting in act of treason against the country, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm also thinking about what Trump has been through. You talk about this lawfare. They took away his ability to freely run his businesses in Trump Corporation. They persecute his closest friends. I could only, and the last 4 years of this whole buildup, and just to see him win so decidedly on Tuesday night.
Well, let's get to the most important thing. They tried to kill him twice.
Yes.
And they don't give us an answer. We're supposed to believe that these were the acts of two independent madmen acting alone. Sorry, don't buy it. Not buying it. I wrote a book on the Kennedy assassination, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, the case against LBJ. This reminds me of the same thing. In that case, the FBI finished their investigation in 7 days flat. Lee Harvey Oswald's the guy, 3 shots off from behind, case closed. But that's nonsense. Same thing here. Oh, the shooter is Thomas Matthew Crooks. He was acting alone. He's 20 years old, had no Confederates. Okay, well, we see pictures of him on the cell phone. Who's he talking to? Oh, well, Apple refuses to turn over his phone records.
Oh, crazy.
Here's what? They turned over my phone records like that. You know what they found in there? Nothing. That's what they found.
Wow. Apple won't turn over the phone. That is ridiculous.
Yeah, you can look it up. You look it up online. There are a few stories written about it. They thought it would be that when the San Bernardino killer, the mass murderer, they wouldn't turn over his records. Apple refused to turn over his records to law enforcement. They said it would be an invasion of his privacy. But Roger Stone's records, oh yeah, here they are.
One last question. Then you told me this is your 9th interview today.
Yeah, right? It's been a long day, and as I said, I picked up a cold in Madison Square Garden because I shook hands with so many patriots. But
Amen.
I have a hard time getting rid of the cough. I feel pretty good. But
so what's driving Roger Stone today? What's moving you to do a 9th interview just today? We're wrapping up at 11:40 your time.
Well, look, I want to make America great again, and we have a mutual friend who said this would be a great place to come, and I've enjoyed our discussion. You asked good questions, and now I learn you're friends with my friend Patrick Bet-David, so I was glad to be with you. All I want to do is be remembered as somebody who stood up for what they believed in, who stood up for the country. I'm not a mercenary. I work for people I believe in as candidates, and people ask me all the time, who was the greatest president you worked for? That's a very tough question. Or what they usually say is, who's the greatest president of your lifetime? Well, people don't realize this, but I was born in 1952. Dwight Eisenhower was president, General Eisenhower. He was one of our greatest presidents. He was so low-key that nobody knows that. But he ended the war in Korea. You had unbelievable prosperity and peace. He was a great president, but he was so low-key, no one knows it. Nixon was a great president. He ended the war in Vietnam. He reached a strategic arms limitation agreement with the Russians. He opens the door to China, but at the time, China is dirt broke. They have no technology. It's a completely agrarian society. They have no electricity, for God's sakes, outside the major cities. Nixon has no way of knowing that 30 years later, the Bushes are going to give the Chinese most favored nation trading status, and then a few years later, the Clintons are going to sell them illegally our military targeting secrets for illegal campaign contributions. That's what makes China dangerous. Nixon desegregated the public schools. Nixon ended the military draft. Nixon gave us federal revenue sharing. Nixon saved Israel unilaterally from complete annihilation in the 1973 Yom Kippur War over the objections of Henry Kissinger, his national security advisor, over the objections of the Pentagon and the entire national security apparatus. But now when you say his name, what do people say? Oh, Watergate. He was a crook. No, he was a great president. Ronald Reagan restored respect for America around the world, restored our economy. But I have to come back to the greatest of them all, Donald J. Trump. The man is a lion. I've never known a tougher man. I worked for Richard Nixon. I worked for Bob Dole. They were tough guys, but neither one of them as tough as Donald Trump. And he has enormous courage, enormous stamina, enormous ability, and I really think we're about to enter a golden age. I think that he is going to restore our prosperity. He's going to bring peace to the world. He's going to go down now as among our greatest presidents. He's a giant, like Washington, like Lincoln, like Roosevelt. I really feel good about the next 4 years. I think they're going to be the greatest 4 years in our country's history.
Roger, thank you for being so generous with your time, and get some rest and get some Robitussin and whatever medicine you choose, man. With that being said, God bless you. Thank you for sharing your faith too as well. That was amazing, because that's what the Seven Figure Squad is about. How to become a faith-made millionaire. That's really what the Seven Figure Squad is all about. So Roger Stone, appreciate you gracing this conversation. Thank you.
Great to be here. You can find me at stonezone.com. Stonezone.com. Check it out.
Make sure we put all the links here in the description below too as well. And team, make sure we put them in the lower thirds. God bless you, Roger Stone. I'm sure we'll cross paths one day.
If you're ever down in South Florida, bring those cigars. We can fire them up.
Boom, right here, brother. You got it, Roger. Take care, brother. God bless. Bye-bye. So there's so many different parallels of how a political advisor would campaign to make sure a certain president takes victory. And you as an entrepreneur, you as a sales leader, you as a pastor, you as a nonprofit leader, you have to use some of these same characteristics, the skill sets, the attitude, the disposition that a Roger Stone would use for his candidate to do a 2-year campaign, 4-year campaign to make sure that their candidate wins, to make sure people vote for your product, they vote for your service, and they buy. So that being said, please put your biggest takeaway in the comment section below. If you want to check out another interview I did with a pastor named Travis Hearn, how he built a Bible study to a 10,000 member church, some of those sales skills he used to do that, please check out this video here too as well. If you're interested in how a guy like Joey Festi manages Patrick Mahomes' finances and what the rigors are in terms of financial management at that level, check out Joey Festi's interview here too as well. If you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to the Seven Figure Squad YouTube channel. Make sure you hit like, and we'll see you for the next episode. Until we meet again, continue to live smart, continue to love smart, and be money smart today.